This is the third rail, episode 3. Welcome back. I am Dr. Mark James. Today we're going to talk about the curriculum is a cage. Here's the theme of today: how educational systems often prepare students for compliance, not consciousness. Education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world. Nelson Mandela said that a long time ago. Think back to your time when you were in school. What did you learn about who matters in history, whose stories were told, whose voices were centered, and more importantly, what did you learn about in the world? Did your education teach you to question, to challenge, to imagine a different world? Or did it teach you compliance, to sit still, to follow directions, memorize facts that someone else decided were important? The curriculum is a cage. And today, we're talking about it. We're talking about how to break free. This is the third rail, and I am Dr. Mark James. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, I am that I am. Oh, I am that I am. Everything was manifested. They wondering how I do it. You wanna know how I do it? I am that I am. It's really that easy. Know who you are when you speak it. Lost in the phone and the TVs. Everything that shine ain't gold. God sees me just for who I am. When I see.
Welcome back to the third rail. Today's episode is about education, but not the kind of conversation you usually hear. Not about test scores, not about teacher salaries, not about summer vacations. We're going deeper to the roots cause analysis, to the fundamental question of what is education really for? Nelson Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Mandela understood something. He understood our current education system seems to have forgotten that education isn't just about just getting a job. It's not just about economic productivity. It's about consciousness and about liberation. It's about the ability to see the world as it is and imagine it as it could be. But too often our schools are doing the opposite. They're teaching compliant, not consciousness, obedience, not critical thinking. Today, we're asking, what would it mean to truly liberate education? Last year, I spent time in Uganda, in particular in Kampala, and I visited schools. And man, I tell you, there was a school on every corner. And every time I went into a school, the curriculum looked the same. The curriculum looked like memorization of facts, and to be honest, non-African facts. Facts that pointed to Europe, that pointed to the Western world. Let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the colonial roots of modern education. To understand American education, we have to understand its history, and that history is colonial. The modern school system wasn't designed to liberate. It was designed to control. Horace Mann, often called the father of American public education, was explicit about this. He wanted schools that would produce obedient workers for the industrial economy. The goal simply wasn't critical thinkers. The goal was compliant employees. And for Black and Indigenous students, education was even more explicitly about control. The Carlisle Indian Industrial School founder's motto was, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Schools for formerly enslaved people often focus on teaching proper behavior, meaning white, middle-class norms, rather than academic excellence. The message was clear: assimilate or be punished. Those roots are still, unfortunately, with us. The structure of the school today, the obsession with standardized testing, the hidden curriculum of obedience and conformity, it's all connected. Let's get deep into the critical pedagogy and the liberatory frameworks that exist. But now there's another tradition, a counter tradition to this. It's called critical pedagogy, and it begins with a radical idea. Education should be about liberation and not domination. Paul Freire, one of my favorites, a Brazilian educator, wrote one of my favorite books called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And he critiqued the banking model of education, where teachers deposit knowledge in passive students. Instead, he envisioned education as a practice of freedom. Freire's model students aren't empty vessels, they're active participants. Education becomes a dialogue, not a monologue. Bell hooks on Freire's work, writing about teaching as a practice of freedom, about classrooms as spaces of possibilities. And before them, there were HBCUs, institutions created by and for Black people when they were forbidden to learn anywhere else. They understood education was about the whole person, mind, spirit, body, individual, and community, past, present, and future. I have spent my life working with HBCUs. I have been to 2 HBCUs. And one of the greatest achievements that I always love to do is when I go into these libraries and look at the old pictures of our students in HBCUs. They had a vision before they even saw freedom. They had a vision when all they saw was red stop signs saying you can't. When they saw laws that said you could not. They saw the endless possibilities. That is why it is important that we lean to our ancestors for some of our answers that will guide us to the future. So let's talk about it. Who benefits from compliance? Let's ask the uncomfortable question. Who benefits when students are trained to comply instead of question? Employers benefit. They get workers who follow directions without resistance. The state benefits. It gets citizens who accept the status quo instead of demanding change. Systems of power benefit. They reproduce themselves generation after generation because nobody learns to imagine alternatives. And who loses? Students lose, especially students from marginalized and resilient communities. They're denied the critical thinking skills needed to challenge their own oppression. Communities lose. They're deprived of conscious, engaged citizens who could organize for change. Democracy loses because democracy requires people to think critically and question authority and imagine new futures. It's not an accident, guys. The design is working exactly as it's intended to. Let's talk a little bit about student activism and curriculum reform. But students across this country are passive. They are passive. Students have organized for educational justice, the sit-ins, civil rights movements in the 60s. What are they doing now? The ongoing fight for ethnic studies, students now know when they're being cheated and they're demanding better. Today, student activists are fighting for curriculum that reflects their histories and culture. Stop. Let's park right there. A local HBCU that I know very well. There is another adjacent PWI, predominantly white institution, that have 5 times more African American history class offerings. Let that sit in. Are we honoring our ancestors? Or are we trying to satisfy different certifying agencies? If we're not teaching our students about who they are, what are we teaching them? When Black History Month is a period in a dissertation, rather than being the reason you wrote your thesis, it's important that we understand this. Let's take a look at restorative justice instead of school to prison pipeline. Mental health support in trauma-informed schools, fair funding, and equitable resources. These aren't just policy demands, they're visions of what education could be. And they're coming from the people most impacted, the students themselves. Let's start with some guiding questions. As we close, let's take a look at this. What would a truly liberatory curriculum look like? What did your education teach you about your own worth? When I was a kid in elementary school in Englewood, New Jersey, during Black History Month, I used to feel nervous because I knew they would pull out that picture of the slaves lined up on the slave ship. And I was in a school that was predominantly white, and that's when the teacher gained their energy to say, we're so thankful for our Black boys and Black girls in the classroom that they don't have to experience this. But what it really taught us is that we were inferior to the white students that their ancestors didn't lay down on a slave ship. It made us think that our relationship, not only with America, but with existence, came off of a slave ship and ended with the bullet that went through Martin Luther King's head. Such a fallacy. So our self-worth was minimalized. Who benefits from compliance? What would it mean to reimagine a school space for freedom, a freedom school, a true freedom school? The curriculum is a cage, but cages can't open. It starts with asking the right questions. Thank you for joining us for episode 3. Next week, we're going global, connecting the dots between anti-Blackness in Paris, Palestine, and Peoria. Episode 4, Global Anti-Blackness from Paris to Palestine to Peoria. This is the third rail, where race, power, and truth collide. Ashe and thank you.
You wanna know how I do it? I am that I. From the heights to the west coast, all this fake recognition gets old. Time to get rid.